Okay, so we've had a couple rough days in the NHL preseason with a couple fights breaking out, and we brought Max in here to talk about it. What do you think so far of these fights in the preseason? Pretty unusual for a preseason.
Yeah, I think it's definitely unusual for preseason. And the fight between Toronto and Buffalo, it's something you don't see a whole lot anymore. Just a fight between old guys and even a player coming off the ice. So that's really unusual. Not something you see in preseason, which is usually a bit toned back. And it's an interesting thing. It all started between just a regular fight, two players, and one of the players, the Buffalo player, Trop, at the end of the fight got knocked down and hit his head on the ice, which a lot of people would say is a good reason to take fighting out of the NHL. And the thing about that is, really, it's just they want to make a rule where helmets have to stay on the whole fight. Trop's helmet fell off midway through, and then his full impact was on his head as he came down. So if you keep helmets on, and as soon as they fall off, that's when they break off the fights. That should be the end of that. But afterwards, after the fight, after a TV timeout, John Scott of the Buffalo Sabres instigated another fight with Phil Kessel, and then it all just kicked off. Everyone starts fighting. And so Scott, a tough guy, goes after Kessel, the star player, and Kessel clearly doesn't want to fight him, so he slashes him and tries to really get away. That's when everyone starts fighting in, and then Kessel keeps kind of slashing, doing some dirty things. David Clarkson comes off the bench and ties up Scott. Everyone fights. Fight goes as usual. Nothing wrong there. Goalie fight happened, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
Rarely see that. But then that was really all it came to. Not too much fighting after that. Everyone brawled and that was it. But obviously with a fight that big, there's some consequences. There's a lot of penalty minutes afterwards. So first things, David Clarkson got an automatic 10-game suspension because he came off the ice. That's to prevent the big bench clearing brawl. The first or second player that comes off automatically gets a 10-game. So even though he didn't really fight John Scott all that much, just held him up, prevented him from getting to Phil Kessel, that's a 10-game suspension. Now, Phil Kessel, as of yet, has not been suspended, but will have a review. He'll have to have a conference, I think, over a phone call, and I believe he should get suspended. He really did three things that could be penalized for, apart from actually fighting. So he slashed twice. First, to kind of get Scott to leave him alone. He's obviously a much smaller player, doesn't want to get just beat up by Scott, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Second, after, whether or not before Clarkson was out, I don't know, but Phil Kessel's out of the way, comes back again, bigger slash at the ankles or somewhere of Scott, really unsportsmanlike, just Phil Kessel's mad or something. And then after the fight's all over, everyone's bringing up, Kessel skates by and jabs Scott in the stomach with a stick, which I thought it was a really dumb, dirty, unsportsmanlike play, and Kessel should get probably a 2-game suspension for unsportsmanlike. And then John Scott, which a lot of players, especially Toronto fans, might say he should be suspended. He's clearly instigating. He got penalized for that in-game, got a 5-minute fighting, 2-minute instigating, and then a game misconduct. And I think that's really all he deserves. I don't think there should be another suspension there. Clearly instigating, but nothing too bad. Didn't just come up and start fighting Phil Kessel, let him know ahead of time, and it seemed like an okay play.
And then what about the Zach Cassian incident in another scenario in Vancouver?
So another preseason game, which should be a little more toned down, and Zach Cassian just made a really bad play here. As Sam Gagner was going to pass the puck, Zach Cassian was coming in looking like he wanted to deliver a big hit. He's kind of a tougher player. That's what he does, which is fine. But the pass got off pretty far ahead of time. So Cassian kind of stops up, doesn't hit him, but swings his stick up and makes full contact with Gagner's jaw, breaks his jaw, and just really a bad play. He got suspended 5 games for that. I think that's mostly because he's had no prior incident, but this was a really dirty play, He's clearly just trying to make a big hit, even when he couldn't. It was clearly illegal. He has to be in charge of where his stick is. That can't be an accident. You have to be in control of that. So I think that should be closer to a 10-game suspension. It's clearly much worse than did Clarkson just coming off the bench.
Yeah, especially with Gagne injured now.
Yeah, he's injured indefinitely. His jaw's broken. He clearly can't play. That's just really a bad play. So, I mean, the way the rules are written, that's a good call on how long the length is. There'll be a link in the description to a Department of Player Safety video explaining that. But I think those two suspension lengths don't add up. So I think Cassian's should be longer, or maybe Clarkson's should be shorter since he wasn't really fighting and agitating once he came off the bench.
And why do you think tempers are so high this preseason?
I don't know. I think it's preseason, everyone's fighting for a spot on the team. Even players who are already established want to maintain that line spot. I think Cassian's trying to show how physical he is. He played first line time with Zidane, had a physical player last year. And that's what you need, a physical player on the line to take care of your star player. But I don't know. It's not, players aren't thinking. I mean, that's, especially Zach Cassian.
And has the NHL been proactive enough, especially with concussions in other sports? Have they been proactive enough in preventing these concussions, especially with concussions caused by fighting?
I think they have. They've made a big impact of really explaining every suspension that they do. There's always a video on that, always a summary. They have things that go off every time, a list of a couple things, whether they're a past offender, whether it caused an injury. So I think they're good. They got to be a little more consistent. We saw that in the playoffs last year with, I forget who it was exactly, but a star player, I think it was Shea Weber, got away with a big, what should have been a penalty, and then smaller players kind of getting the worst end of that. But overall, they're doing a good job. They're trying to bring that issue to light.
And fighting in the NHL, good for hockey, bad for hockey?
It's very good for hockey. It's a part of the game. It keeps players from being kind of jerks and pests and just going out and picking at your star players. If you want to do something stupid on the ice, you got to be willing to drop the gloves. So it should be hockey, should always have fighting, but I think helmets should stay on to prevent that concussion. I think then it's perfectly fine.
Okay, that's it for us today. That's Max. I'm Josh. Check out the blog and follow me on Twitter.